Welcome to the Commercial Property Podcast. My name is Suzi Carter. I am a chartered surveyor. I've been involved in commercial property in the UK for 30 years and I've done hundreds of commercial property deals. I'm here to be your guide through the commercial property market, whether you're an experienced investor or whether you're literally thinking about dipping your toe in the world of commercial real estate. I will be here talking to you about all kinds of things commercial real estate in the UK, and I've also got some fantastic guest experts who are joining me. So please do subscribe if you'd like to follow, and if you'd like any more help or information on commercial real estate, please do click www.suzicarter.com, which is my website, and you can find out all the ways I can help you. So stay tuned for this week's episode. Welcome back to the Commercial Property Podcast, and today we are talking about the use of artificial intelligence, AI, in commercial property investing. Now, obviously AI is moving at a rate of knots, and everything that I say today may not be relevant actually in even 6 months' time. There might be huge improvements, but I thought it was worth doing a podcast on this particular topic because a lot of my clients are starting to use AI to help them source. A lot of my clients are, to some degree, starting to rely on AI. And so I think it would be useful to kind of just bust a few myths about the use of AI and also talk about where I think it works really, really well, and also kind of give you some prompts you might want to consider using with your investing, because one thing is for sure, that AI can speed up processes. And, you know, if you can find it as use it as a shortcut to speed up processes, then obviously that is a really, really good thing. Saving time, perhaps saving money, and certainly kind of getting some good answers. So I think my observation on using AI in sourcing commercial and also finding your niche, etc., which we'll talk about shortly, it is very mixed. I think that it can be really, really helpful with some things and can short circuit days and days of work. And with others, you need to treat it with a massive dose of caution. So kind of let's get into it, and I'll kind of give you my view on this. And I would be really interested if anybody is an AI expert and I'm not covering anything that they think the functionality can do. I'd be really interested to hear from you as to kind of where you think AI may be able to help more. So I think the first thing to say is AI is not going to replace investors. So I've done an episode already on AI where I coming from a tenant point of view, because in commercial property, our tenants are businesses, and there are going to be varying impacts of AI from different businesses. So it's really important to, from an investment point of view, to understand the impact of artificial intelligence on different businesses. And when you're putting tenants in properties, when you're buying a property with a sitting tenant, you need to understand the medium and long-term future of that particular tenant. You know, there will be some tenants that just won't exist in maybe 2 to 5 years' time. In fact, maybe even shorter timeframes than that. Anecdotally, I've heard of a lot of types of businesses that are being, you know, structurally affected much quicker than that. So it's really important when you're letting to really understand the impact of AI. So there's a whole podcast episode on that. What I'm going to talk about today is more about how you use it as an aid in your sourcing and in finding your niche, because AI can't replace investors. I think where AI is really useful, and obviously this may change in the future, but where AI is really helpful is as a supplementary resource, as saving time. What it doesn't replace is the nuance. And, you know, we get paid on understanding the nuance of different types of properties, the subtleties of locations, the subtleties of different lease terms, asset value, add opportunities. And that's our payday as investors. That's what we need to specialize in. That's what we need to understand. And, you know, my very firm view is that it'll take a long time for nuanced professions to be replaced. And I genuinely think that investment is one of those. You know, you become a specialist in an area, You build great relationships. Obviously, that's very difficult to replicate. You both with tenants and with other landlords and with agents and with other key stakeholders. It's very, very difficult to replicate. And then you understand the nuance of how you can add value that I think that AI just can't appreciate at the moment. That may change in the future. So there is a difference between using AI to give you some knowledge, speed up your information gathering, and using AI as a replacement of building, replacing building relationships locally, and all that nuanced stuff I've just talked about. And so, if you're using AI to find opportunities, analyze opportunities, carry out due diligence, I'm telling you now, having tested it for this, you're definitely going to be missing massive tricks along the way, because it just hasn't got the capacity to do that at the moment. Even putting a lease into something like ChatGPT at the moment is challenging, because it often doesn't read it properly, will miss key lease clauses. And, again, one of the skills of investors to be able to read leases, and not just read it as in these are the lease clauses, but what does it mean? How can I add value by maybe changing this lease clause or whatever? I just don't think it understands at the moment. But what it can really help with, and this is where I'm a fan, is helping you find your niche. It can shortlist things for you very, very quickly. And I plugged the Sunday or the Times top 100 growing tech companies into ChatGPT. I then asked it to look at where the common characteristics of those locations are, where those businesses are. I then asked are there any other locations where there's common characteristics? How far are these tech companies moving out of core locations? Which of the locations are, emerging? Now, what I didn't do is go out and buy a property off the back of that. What I then I used that as a base case bit of information to go and do some research on the back of that. So I think that is where AI can be really helpful. If I had tried to find out the information that I asked AI for that particular thing, I would have been there for days, probably weeks, in trying to find that information. But what I'm not doing when I'm using AI is I'm not taking it as read. I'm not taking it as absolutely gospel what they're saying. I'm testing it. I'm challenging it. I'm speaking to key stakeholders, and I'm kind of making sure that it's speaking the truth, rather than kind of taking it all as read. So it's a fantastic niching tool. I would definitely recommend kind of having a play with it in niching. And if you don't know the right prompts to put in, and we'll talk about prompts later, you can ask AI what the right prompts are to put into, ChatGPT, Claude, Proximity, all of Gemini, all of those others, to get the right answers out. So if you use it correctly, if you're asking it the right questions, the right prompts, you're using it to go from the general down to the specific, and also finding general trends, I think that it can be incredibly powerful. But it can also give you bad information with extraordinary confidence. So it can actually, tell you something's absolutely true. You can challenge it and it'll still tell you it's absolutely true, but it might be absolute rubbish. Commercial investing is actually all about people. It's all about strategy. It's all about negotiation. It's about tenant demand and building supply. It's about relationships. It's about risk management. And I think there's only certain of those that AI can actually deal with it. So it actually supports your decision making, not replaces it. And you're going to hear me probably repeat this a number of times during this podcast, because I can't emphasize enough that this does not replace the investor. It does not replace the legwork that we all find pretty dull, calling agents, asking for comparables, calling agents and finding out about how the market's working, walking the streets, understanding why there's different operators in different locations, speaking to tenants. For me, that is the that is where you gain the competitive advantage in your commercial investing. You gain the competitive advantage by going the extra mile that other investors won't go. Because any fool can buy a commercial property, any fool can buy a residential property. What we're looking for is great deals. We're looking for great locations to invest in, where there's going to be growth, where it's going to be future proofed, and we want to buy properties where we can add value and where, supply and demand are in your favor. There's more demand than supply. And this is where the nuance comes in. This is where the knowledge comes in. And this is where AI can help you and support you, but you need to challenge it. So,
this episode is brought to you by Bond Finance Limited, your trusted partner for commercial property mortgage solutions. Are you an experienced residential property investor about to diversify into commercial property, looking for funding options? Bond Finance can help. Whether you're planning to expand, refinance, or make a major property investment, Bond Finance provides expert advice with access to a wide range of lenders, from high street to specialist. Book a free discovery session today to explore how we can tailor commercial funding solutions to your unique investment strategy. Visit www.bondfinanceltd.co.uk and take the next step in your commercial finance journey.
Probably in summary, I would say that one of the biggest advantages of AI is how quickly it can process information. Because traditionally, just giving my tech company example, you might spend days researching locations, reading market reports, reviewing planning documents, analysing demographics, or kind of analysing risks, looking at trends, and it can basically help you do that initial research in a fraction of the time. And genuinely it can, especially if you're giving it the source material. Kind of here's the web link to a CBRE report or whatever, and it's kind of giving you that. So you can use some of these these chat tools, these AI tools, to analyze the market trends, identify growth sectors, compare locations, summarize reports, and build sourcing strategies off the back of it. Now, I think that's a great use of AI. I think that is a really great use of AI. And, I certainly do use it for that, especially if I'm trying to find new niches or do research on certain areas. But what I don't do is blindly trust it. I will go out and test the assumptions. And, niching is so important. And I've talked about this on this podcast, and, whoever will listen to me about it, because there's so many different types of commercial property. There's so many different types of commercial tenants. And therefore, logic dictates that not every strategy is going to work. There's growth tenants, there's tenants in decline, there's growth areas, there's areas in decline, there's good properties, bad properties. And one big mistakes I see a lot of investors making is trying to look at everything. Retail 1 week, industrial the next, offices, one location in Scotland then 1 week because a deal happens to have come off, the next one in Portsmouth because a deal happens to have come up there. And the result is often huge confusion, overwhelm, and lack of focus. And the best commercial investors become specialists. They go an inch wide and a mile deep, and AI can just help accelerate that process by finding those areas. So, for example, investors can ask AI to investigate sectors benefiting from structural changes in the economy. So which commercial property sectors are benefiting most from e-commerce growth? And then where is that growth concentrated? What types of locations, what kinds of towns, etc. So you've got things like logistics, you've got healthcare, which benefiting from aging populations, NHS pressures, convenience-led retail from changing consumer habits, and from kind of new towns and new housing developments springing up, flexible workspace due to hybrid working. So it can also, and so it's really useful for that kind of thing, looking at the more general and identifying potential niches where you're then going to go away and research them personally. It can also help you match your strategies to your personal goals and resources. So, I want to find hands-off strategies where there's lower management intensity, predictable income, blue chip tenants, sale and leaseback opportunities, whatever that might be. And it can help you again with general answers on that you're going to go away and investigate. And you'll have noticed that every time I talk about this, I say it'll give you information, then you need to go and make sure that it's right, and you can research it. It gives you a good pointer. It'll give you a good starter for 10. In other words, it'll give you a long list, which you can then go away and curate into a shorter list. And AI definitely isn't a silver bullet. My experience is it can misinterpret lease clauses. It can misunderstand planning policy. It can provide outdated market information. It can even invent statistics or quote legislation incorrectly. So it should never be a substitute for professional advice or real world experience. It should never be a substitute for relationship building and all that nuanced stuff, which as investors get really, really good at. So, that's where it's important. So at the end of the day, it's an assistant. It's not replacing you as an investor. It's just an assistant. And so that really is the simple message that I want to leave you with. And I'm going to give you some prompts that I think are quite useful in AI. And obviously, the deeper you ask these questions, the more accurate the information is going to be. So, in summary, I think location analysis is really good. It can identify strategies. It can identify trends, which are really, really good. It can also potentially tally the tenant demand, so the rising trends with locations as well, which I think is really useful. It can identify growth indicators, but what it can't do for you, obviously, is walk the streets. It can't get a feel of an area. It can't build the relationships. It can't identify the antisocial behavior or the poor parking or the flooding risk or the difficult access or the challenging neighbours, the poor visibility or whatever that might be. Because commercial property is very, very highly physical and location specific. You can have one property that looks exactly the same as the next, but it performs completely differently because its location, because of its tenor. So those boots on the ground are still really, really important, which obviously is bad news for a lot of people, because it would be easier for everybody if AI could replace all this stuff. There are some bits of tech that I think are quite useful for analysing leases. One of my clients has formed a piece of AI called Ease AI, and that is great for analysing auction packs and leases. I would probably trust that over things like ChatGPT and Claude. Again, that is developing and evolving. So again, it's not necessarily a substitute for professional advice, but it can give you a good starter for 10. You still need building surveys done. It can't identify structural movement, holes in roofs, asbestos risks, building defects, and there's skill sets it just doesn't have, like negotiation, relationship building, understanding tenant demand, commercial awareness, value add opportunities. It can go so far and then it can't go further. So there is an argument that as AI becomes more widely available, then genuine commercial expertise will become even more valuable, because the genuine differentiator between those just using AI to form views and those with real world experience, with real world knowledge is judgment. And if you've got that experience, if you've got the knowledge, then you can use your judgment as to whether AI is telling you the truth, whether AI is way off the mark, and whether a deal is good, whether a deal is bad, whether the location is worth investing or not. And investors who understand risk will interpret information more accurately and intelligently. Investors who ask better questions because of their knowledge will get better answers. And the investors who understand asset management will spot opportunities that others will continue to miss. This is why AI is not a replacement for knowledge and real world experience. So, I don't think that AI anytime soon is going to replace investors, but it is a useful tool that investors can use to short circuit some of the knowledge that you might need to get. So use it to enhance your thinking, use it to accelerate research, use it to improve efficiency, use it to challenge assumptions and explore opportunities, but never outsource your judgment, and always do checks and balances on what it's telling you. And that is really, really important. So just some prompts that I've kind of put into AI that I think might be quite useful. Now, obviously, I can't cover a huge range of prompts on this podcast, but I thought it might be quite useful to kind of put some of these in. Again, please don't assume that the answers that are going to be kicked out are 100% accurate. Sometimes they're not even 50% accurate, but you can then probe some of these questions and then it'll give you a good starter for 10, maybe a short list of locations or short list of strategies to go out and use your judgment on and find out information on. So, for example, based on the following investor profile, identify the most suitable commercial property strategies and niches. Consider risk tolerance, available time, capital management intensity, financing complexity, and desired income profile. And then you could put an investor profile below, X amount of available capital, you work full time, want predictable income, want to have future-proof tenants, limited development expertise, comfortable with moderate asset management and a moderate attitude to risk, long-term wealth focus, whatever it might be. And again, you'll get a long list of opportunities that you'll then need to use your judgment to explore. You could look at contrarian opportunities. So, for example, identify overlooked or under the radar commercial property sectors in the UK where investor demand is currently low, but occupier demand is strong or improving. Explain the reason why the market might be currently mispricing these sectors. So again, nice little kind of contrarian investor approach. You could look at macro trends. Act as a highly experienced UK commercial property strategist. Identify the commercial property sectors most likely to outperform over the next 5 to 10 years due to structural economic changes, demographic shifts, technology trends, changes in government, infrastructure investment, and changing occupier demand. Explain why these sectors may outperform and highlight the risks associated with each. Again, it's like a funnel. We're looking at the top of the funnel and to get some ideas, and then we're going to spend some time researching all of this. Just a couple more before I finish up. You can ask ChatGPT, you can ask Copilot, you can ask Claude for these prompts, and then just have a little play with it. Demographic changes. Analyze how aging populations, hybrid working, e-commerce growth, AI adoption, and changing consumer behaviour are likely to affect different commercial property sectors in the UK over the next decade. Recession resilience. Which commercial property sectors historically perform best during periods of inflation, economic slowdown, or higher interest rates? Explain the drivers behind their resilience and whether that's still relevant today, and the types of tenants most likely to remain strong. So you might also want to find AI to source commercial deals. So, for example, act as an experienced commercial property asset manager. Analyze the following property particulars. So you'd input some property particulars and identify every potential value add opportunity. Consider lease restructuring, rent reviews, vacant space, planning angles, title splitting, change of use, tenant mix improvements, multi-letting, operational inefficiencies, service charge optimization, and redevelopment potential. And again, you'd think that would give you the definitive answer, but what it will do is it'll kick out some decent stuff. It'll kick out some stuff that might be wrong. And again, it's using your judgment and your knowledge to assess this. So again, it's a shortcut. And then just finally, maybe using it for location analysis. Identify UK towns where industrial demand is rising due to logistics growth, manufacturing, reshoring, onshoring, motorway connectivity, population expansion, and supply shortages. Include vacancy trends, major employers, and infrastructure improvements. So, the sky's the limit on what you ask AI, but the secret is in the prompt. And the secret is then doing your due diligence on what AI has told you to make sure that it's telling you the truth. But genuinely, the differentiator between investors who are using this well and investors who are trying to shortcut their own skill set by using AI is going to be vast. So I would anticipate that those that try and use AI will make mistakes if they're only using AI, not phoning agents, not kind of using their own knowledge. Those that obtain knowledge, those that can then apply that knowledge and use AI to short circuit some of the questions they have on that knowledge, and then filter opportunities, they are the people that will really, really benefit from using AI. So a few health warnings in this. I really thought it was important to do a podcast on this, because I definitely see a lot of investors using AI incorrectly and relying too much on what it's kicking out. So big health warnings on AI, but equally, if you use it correctly, if you put the right prompts in, and then very importantly, use your own knowledge and nuance and judgment to work out, whether it's telling you the truth and where you can concentrate on, it can genuinely be a really great aid to help you in your investing. So thank you for listening to the Commercial Property Podcast. I'm really interested in your experiences of using AI in commercial, and I will continue to share mine. But in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you next time on the Commercial Property Podcast.